Today is Tuesday, May 12th, 2020. This is a meeting of the Acushnet Board of Selectmen, and we continue to participate remotely. It's our response to the COVID-19 crisis, and we're finding, I think, that this works pretty well for all of us. I think that this is we are as productive through Zoom, I think, as we can be live. I don't feel like we've lost much in doing it this way, but it's certainly been an adjustment for all of us. So let's go to the, we've got an agenda for the meeting. Could I get a motion to accept the consent agenda for the today's meeting, Tuesday, May 12th, 2020?
So moved.
I'll second.
Second, Mr. DeRoche. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We've got minutes that was last week's meeting, May 5th, 2020. I did ask Lisa to make one change in those minutes. Asked her to include a comment I had made. I'm assuming that change was circulated to the two of you.
That's
you now
correct.
have the final version of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve them?
I haven't read the minutes. I haven't read the minutes, Mr. Chairman. I don't think we got them until this morning or something.
It was this morning, yes.
Yeah, I haven't read them, so I'll just abstain.
Mr. DeRoche, are you comfortable with the minutes?
Yes, I read them and your comments were included.
Okay.
My
Mr. Gasper, are you okay with us voting them, or would you prefer
Yeah,
to read them before we vote them?
Yeah, sure. I'm just going to abstain from them.
Okay, all right. Mr. DeRoche, could I get a motion to approve the minutes of May 5th, 2020?
So moved.
I'll second that motion. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, aye, and Mr. Gasper's abstained. Okay, if you read the minutes, Mr. Gasper, if there's anything in there you object to, certainly bring it forward, and you know, we can certainly revise the minutes even after they're voted. We
Sure.
want them to be accurate. We want them to be accurate, certainly.
Sure.
I'm going to, as we skip ahead in the agenda, we've got one item under new business, and it's a request from the town clerk, Pamela Labonte, to appoint it's a one-day appointment for somebody to be appointed to the Board of Registrars. She needs somebody that's not her to certify the signatures on her nomination papers. So she's asked that we appoint Belinda Michaud as a one-day registrar for that purpose.
So moved.
Second, Mr. DeRoche.
I'll second that motion.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. That passes. Back to the, close this. Back to the agenda. Do we want to talk about the employee vacation rollover? Why don't we do that before we do the budget? Can we do that? And again, once we're on the budget, I'd rather stay on the budget. What are your thoughts? We had a good long conversation last week. We've all had time to think about it. What are your thoughts with regard to, and there was a detailed document that was circulated showing what people have for unused vacation time. It ranges from 4.9 weeks to a low of, oh boy, a low of nothing.
Right.
But there's some people with a lot of vacation time, and you know, various reasons they've got a lot of vacation time unused. And I as I've reflected on it, you know, this COVID thing might account for some of it, and some shortages in some departments might account for some of it. But, you know, the COVID's really only been with us for 2 months. And so we've got employees that had 7 uninterrupted months, 8 uninterrupted months to use most of the vacation time, and for whatever reason didn't. So I'm sensitive to the fact that COVID's made it difficult to go anywhere and do anything. Even though gas is cheap to get there, I think, we can't necessarily blame all of the unused vacation time on COVID. I think there are some unusual circumstances in some cases, but I think it's hard to have a blanket policy with all of these situations. I think, we talked about, where's Mrs. Leonard? She's not on.
She's not here today.
Oh, she's not. Okay. Well, we had talked about, her situation and the fact that she's, we've asked her to be in town hall. And we've asked her maybe to go a little bit above and beyond, and, because Rachel's been out, so she hasn't been able to take time. And, Julie's doing 2 jobs. So I know we got some people that have unusual circumstances, but for the most part, it's hard to justify, people with, it's a bunch of people with 3 to 5 weeks, 2 to 5 weeks of unused vacation time. And I guess I'm inclined to say, all right, you've now got 6 weeks to use whatever time you've got, and 7 weeks, and maybe allow a rollover of no more than a week is sort of what I'm thinking at this point. Other than exceptions, we could look at exceptions, I suppose, and I've named a couple I think we could consider as a one-off. Mr. Gasper, go.
Mr. Chairman. So I've gone back to it. I watched the previous meeting because, a lot of people obviously kind of chuckled at that, some of the comments that were made. And so I've gone back and I've looked at this sheet that Ms. Hebert's presented us with all the employees on it. And then, you start looking at the available hours versus used hours. And I started doing that math. And I was wondering how we ended up accumulating some of these folks, both hours being used. And we don't even allow that many weeks vacation. So I talked to some employees, and I guess past practice with Mr. Noble was, he just kind of just let people carry over overtime, right? Without a real good excuse, I guess I'll say. So I think that's adding to the pain now that we're in this situation. And yeah, it's maybe a good thing for the board so we can review this in the future, but you look at some of the accumulative time and it's just exorbitant, and we don't even allow that many weeks. So that's what raised my question to talk to some people and find out what the hell was going on and how this occurred. And, it was brought to my attention that was the case where he just, he allowed people to carry over vacation time. And,
how much time was allowed to be carried over? I think it was only a week, I think.
I can't comment on that, Roger. I haven't dug that deep into the numbers. I don't think that's my job really to sit. All I'm trying to do is some simple math based on what we've been given in front of us and looking at, the accrual based in the ASME contract, what it states. And I even looked at some of these employees that I know haven't been here that long, and I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. You don't even get that many weeks for the amount of time you've been here, but that's been the case.
Do you have an example, Mr. Gasper? Do you have an example of someone? Use the EE number if you want, and point to the EE number if we don't want to name names. I've got the spreadsheet in front of me. We haven't allowed people to roll over multiple weeks at a time, I don't think.
Well, I haven't done the whole list, but I've done several of them. So I'll just use. Let me find where he is because So I'm going to use if you look down at Miguel, one of our workers, right? The kids.
How much vacation time?
It says he's still got 3.2 weeks, but that would mean that he used no vacation time because that's all he gets according to the contract.
Yeah, I've got him. This says he's used 2 days, give or take.
Right, but in the contract, it says 5 years is 3 weeks, 2 days, 2/5 in the ASME contract. And so that would come out to the 3 weeks, 2 days, 3.2 or whatever. So it's just, and I know Julie made a comment to me that some of the used hours column, Mr. Cabral, isn't correct because of the transfer to the HOPPA system. Ms. Hebert made that comment to me a week ago, whatever it was, that Julie and I had a conversation. So it's a little bit difficult to know. I think Julie's got a better handle on it now from when she printed this list, but she's made one of the columns that she's made reference to, and I'll just use the example that we did. I think it was one of our fire guys, right? I won't name names, but it was one of our fire guys. So she used an analogy there. She gave me an example where it shows that some time was used, what was unused, and the list is not that accurate. Let's put it that way. I think Julie probably has a better list. So when we look at the amount of time that's left, it might not be that much, or maybe Julie can say that column's accurate, but the use time isn't. I don't know how one can be and one can't be, but it's something that I think that the board needs to do a better job in the town administrator moving forward with a new town administrator. We have to be conscientious of people and vacation times, because if we were running a business, we wouldn't be able to just keep doing this and somebody that has 4 weeks now has 6 weeks. It doesn't work out if you are running a business, and we are running a business.
Ms. Hebert, can I ask you to comment on the?
Yeah, so the column that says the used hours is not completely accurate. The available hours is accurate, and that's what they currently have for time. It's just normally you would be able to add both together to get the starting point,
Yes.
But because of Harper's, the changeover to Harper's, the used hours also includes adjustments. The way that the report was run, for whatever reason, when it came over from the treasurer's office, it included any of those adjustments that we had to make because we had, a new system. It was a new fiscal year. We only got it in April, so by the time we had the changeover in July, there were some adjustments for people. So,
But available hours is correct. That column is correct.
That is correct. And so for the example that you listed, there may be a week that carried over from the year before for that individual. I will say we checked through everything and made sure that all the hours were correct. Once it did come over to the system, we checked through every individual for August, so the available hours should be correct. And I know our office, the finance office, always checks the memos that would come through from Brian for the 1 week carryover. It was always ever 1 week that I saw. The only exception that I know of offhand was the treasurer collector. When she came in November, they had some people who had left the office, and it was it wasn't fully staffed. So I think she had 2 weeks. And I know Brian allowed her to carry whatever time. It was 2 weeks and under because of that situation. But otherwise, we checked everything. So I can't think of anyone else offhand that got more than the 1 week. That's just, off the top of my head.
Okay. Could I propose then that we allow people to carry over a week's vacation time, no more than a week's vacation time, and maybe put folks on notice at this point that anything more than a week is not going to be carried over. You need to basically use it or lose it by June 30th. What do you two think of that concept, gentlemen? Mr. Roche.
So you're suggesting business as usual in a way? The way we've been doing things, basically. And just let it go. And yeah, I agree with that. I can agree with business as usual. Use your vacation time this year. We'll let you carry 1 week. Start next season, next year, fiscal 21, all even, and go from there. I find that it's too trying to. There's too many people. There's too many circumstances. And to create a blanket effect and just keep it the way it's been. I know there's some discussion about, it has to go before the town administrator or whatever, or the board of selectmen, but just keep it business as usual. And that's that, because it's very difficult to say you worked harder than this person didn't work as hard as this. And how do we, and Julie, I need to ask that, had anyone submitted any, paperwork this week or any comments to to be considered for anything different, and things are going to change next week with Baker's announcement. Employees still have 7 weeks. You can travel, you can go places. Excuse me a minute, but in a nutshell, that's my point.
Mr. Gasper, any further thoughts on that? Would that plan be acceptable to you?
I think so, Roger. I mean, it is, we have to, I get understanding the circumstances, right? And I think you're pretty much, I mean, you're going pretty much where I was last week. And, for everybody to be able to carry over a week, it is too difficult. I think Mr. DeRoche made a comment about next year it's business as usual. It's not, because everybody gains 1 week compounded on whatever they have. So, hopefully now that Ms. Hebert's the town administrator, we'll be doing a better job at looking at this. And, I think it's important to recognize that I've talked to some department heads that they say, I think it's important for department heads to be able to get schedules from their employees for vacation time like they do in the police department, right? You got to schedule your vacation time, and this way there you can plan for those kind of things. And I think it's important for Ms. Hebert and the department heads to be able to look at that, so we don't have, if you have a department with 3 employees, 2 employees out, and just the department heads left there. So I think Ms. Hebert, knowing what's happened in these circumstances, I think she can look at this over the next year and make sure that maybe in the 6 months in, halfway through the year, she's going to look at vacation and see what's going on with accumulations and start talking to people saying you need to start using some vacation time. And, we gotta put our trust in Ms. Hebert, and the reality of it is Ms. Hebert's going to make decisions. I think that the board is going to enforce, right? We're going to say, like we're doing right now, Roger, you're saying, you know what, we'll let you carry over 1 week. Anything above and beyond that, you're going to use it or lose it. And we're basically telling Ms. Hebert what our policy is. We are the Board of Selectmen. We have that right to do that. And, I think Ms. Hebert, giving her that opportunity to be town administrator, I think in time she'll prove that she's going to manage the departments better.
I think we're all on the same page with that. It feels like we're all saying the same thing.
What y'all saying?
Just plan.
Go ahead, say it again, Roger, so we make sure we understand.
That will allow employees to roll over a week into next year. And other than that, it's use it or lose it. Anything beyond a week, if you don't use it by June 30th, you've lost the availability to take that vacation time. I think we all agree conceptually with that. The one additional point I'd like to make is that we should try to keep our minds open to, and I've got no request at this point, but we should certainly keep our minds open to somebody in extraordinary circumstances that, maybe we could make an exception to that rule. I'm not proposing one at this point, but just plant that seed that, if there's anybody out there, Ms. Hebert, that you think we should consider for an exception to that policy, I think we should consider exceptions to the policy. But nothing proposed right now. It would come back to the full board, certainly. So do we need to vote what we?
Yeah, I think Ms. Hebert's presented us with that. I read an email from Ms. Hebert today. It didn't come in until 12 o'clock, but I seen it. She's got a breakdown of the different situations for people. I don't know if you guys seen that or not. There's half dozen, 8 people on that list, but I thought that's what we were going by, is we've all reviewed that list and said this is what it is, and once we voted, it's a done deal.
Oh, I do. I'm sorry. I do have an email here from noon. I haven't seen that. That didn't include anything about payroll, though, about vacation time. So let's, okay, one week rollover maximum, and Ms. Hebert,
Roger,
can I look at anything? Yeah, go, Mr.
Can I make a recommendation for you two gentlemen to be considering if we get, you're going to get somebody, because the chief already wrote in a thing there. If you read through that, little disturbing, his last couple sentences, but anyways, I don't know if anybody's read it yet.
I'm not sure what you're looking at.
Yeah, I didn't receive any email today. As a matter of fact, I wanted to bring.
I've got it. I'm sorry. 11:23. I've not seen this.
Sorry. And I do need to talk to Chris. My interface or for my Selectmen's email has changed dramatically. It doesn't look anything like it used to, and I don't have a email from the inbox. The latest one I have is from Friday. So
we can certainly set you up with a rescue assist for me to look over your computer.
Okay. Because the interface, the page itself changed dramatically. The format's all different. It tells me who they came from, but I haven't received anything since Friday.
All right, there are a lot.
Okay.
All right,
So,
All right, I see that email now. All right, I am not prepared to discuss that now, but we can certainly review that. I've got a
Okay.
bunch of emails from today I've not looked at yet, apparently, so.
So this was just in reference to last week when you had asked for kind of specific people who may need an additional week.
This list is too long, would be my
Well,
initial reaction. There are too many names
So
here.
Roger,
well, that's what I was talking about. I mean, we're going to
That's-
have all kind of people asking, and not that they don't, I mean, it's just, individual cases are tough to make decisions on.
I thought you guys had seen that, and Roger, you were coming out with pretty much, an acceptable plan on my behalf. Can I just say one thing? I mean, if you guys didn't see that email, Mr. DeRoche says he's got problems with his email. So, I mean, the guy, Dave can't make decisions right now. He didn't see the list. But I agree with Dave's concept that too many different circumstances. So we're going to go with that policy, Roger, if we'll let you carry over 1 week. So I've come to the conclusion, regardless of what anybody says to me, I think that you look at the list and you see some people with 3 weeks left on it. You let 1 week carry over. I'm good with that. And then you said use it or lose it. I was good with that. I was assuming that you looked at this list. However, if the board were to be inclined to make certain circumstances for an individual, I would not be in favor of allowing any more carryover. I would ask Ms. Hebert to put a cost associated with that week for that individual and just buy it out. We have the money in the budgets this year. We won't have it next year. So I would rather put
That's an alternative proposal, yeah.
I would rather only 1 week buyout, 1 week carryover. The other week you're going to use it. It doesn't matter if you got 3. So I'm leaning a little bit the other way, and I'm moving towards the middle. But I guess when you look at it, and as Mrs. DeRoche says, and I am compassionate to certain individuals that haven't been able to do it. But once you do it for one, the other department head's going to go, well, that's not fair, and we're going to end up in this swamp. We got to make decisions, gentlemen. That's our job. So
Let me just suggest this to Ms. Hebert. Excuse me. We've got a policy. This is our policy. We're in agreement on the policy. Let's carry this to the next. Give us the opportunity to review that list of names, and maybe just put this on the agenda for next time. We'll figure out whether or not there's anything on that list we should revisit or not. My instinct is that list is too long, but we could certainly consider one-off. We'll buy out a week perhaps, but I didn't know that list was out. When I very honestly said I don't know what we've got for circumstances because I hadn't seen that memo. But let's at this point we've got a policy. We'll review that list that you put forward, and we can discuss that at our next meeting. Can we move into do we want to vote on the vacation policy, gentlemen? Let's vote on the vacation policy. Motion to approve the idea that employees can carry 1 week over into fiscal 2021. Can I get a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second, Mr. DeRoche.
I'll second.
Further discussion on that?
1 week.
All in favor? 1 week, yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
just
Okay.
clarifying that this is for everyone except for police and fire. Is that
They
correct?
have a buyback provision built into their contracts already, correct? Anybody that doesn't have a contrary provision in their contract. Yes.
Do we want to discuss fire separately? Because I know police is already kind of all set, but do we want to have a separate discussion about fire?
What's refresh my memory, what's the issue there?
There's no
Police
language.
have a buyback.
There's no language, Roger.
Yeah,
No
they have no buyback or no carryover in their union contract. In addition, obviously, they're the front line of the pandemic right now. So the fire chief has, when the pandemic first started, the fire chief put a freeze on all vacations because they needed full staff. And they have all been working, full staff, full steam, very hard for the last 2 months, but they've had a vacation freeze because of the lack of additional employees who can fill in for shifts, and knowing that they're, the front line. essentially. And again, as Mr. Gasper said, they have no provision in their contract for buyback or carryover. I think they're the only exception. Everybody else has at least a 1-week carryover provision, but fire in their new contract does not. So we should come up with a plan for them separately. And again, if you look at the available hours, majority have a little over 1 week on a 40-hour week. I know that they work 24-hour shifts, so it's a little bit different, but I think there were a couple who had more time. So I think it's worth considering and coming up with a policy.
Highlighted in pink, if that's the description of that color.
There's only two firefighters with, one's got 3.3. Oh, that's the chief. And there's only one firefighter with 3.7. Everybody else has got under a week and a half. So, you know, I think, gentlemen, because of their shifts, and I did the last contract, and we brought them to a 12-hour shifts is the way their vacation days are broken out, and their time schedules are broken out to 12-hour shifts because they're on 24-hour rotating shifts. We got to be careful with that as far as policy-wise goes and carryover, because that would blow out overtime. So we need to be careful with that. I mean, it's only really one firefighter that has 3-point-something weeks. The rest have 1-point-something weeks. I think that's going to be managed over the next 5 or 6 weeks. But let's see what we get from the chief on, and maybe there's a reason why we can unfreeze their overtime. I don't know. I don't know if the governor, I did look through some things the governor had with paramedics and things of that nature. I don't know if there's rules to your staff as far as how you got to staff them. You have to be a full-fledged paramedic versus an EMT that we normally have. So I think that, you know, we'd have to have the discussion with Chief Gallagher to see. But it's only one individual that has 3+ weeks. Everybody else is under, I think, a week and a half. So I think that could be manageable. But because of the rotating shift, you work 2 days on and you're gone for 5 days. So we just want to be conscientious of that. I can work with Ms. Hebert when it comes to the fire department to see when the costs associated with that.
Yeah, you've got basically 2 employees. One of them's the chief, but you know, I think that the only difference here is that the chief, you know, basically says you can't take, even if you want to, you can't take vacation time. So I think that puts that one employee in extraordinary circumstances. Why don't you, Ms. Hebert, talk with the chief and see if we can figure something out there, and we'll discuss that next week along with the list of names you gave us. I think you know, if there's an exceptions to policy, but I think the list looking for exceptions is too long. So
Yep.
let's. I've not had an opportunity to look at it. Let's look at it, Mr.
Mr.
DeRosa.
Cabral, I just received the email on my other email address, and correct. Everybody applied for it, it seems like. I just don't.
Asking, just to clarify, this is just me looking at the situation of departments that I know about.
And do these people, if they work overtime, do they get paid overtime? Maybe not, because they're on salary, correct?
If they're hourly employees, they would get overtime.
If they're
But
hourly
majority
employees.
majority are salaried.
Right.
I don't understand that question. What are you talking about, department heads overtime?
So no, majority of the department heads listed on that list that I gave you are salaried, so there's no overtime. But if I listed any hourly employees, like clerical union employees on that list in the email, they, as clerical union employees, they are entitled to overtime. If they work more than, you know, 35 hours or 40 hours per week.
Yeah, but how would vacation impact that?
Well, no, I'm just trying to figure out, and once again, we can continue this discussion at another time. I mean, we voted on keeping the rollover. I've just seen this email. You know, people have jobs. They're obligated to come in 35 or 40 hours a week. Is that what they're not? Are they doing something different now? Am I misunderstanding, or is it just the fact that they can't take a week off on vacation? Is that the issue at hand here?
Yeah, I think, you know, what I sent you, the majority, everybody has a unique situation, but many of the departments either have a situation where employees are out or they're low staff, so they're unable to take time. You know, like Lisa was a good example. Rachel has been out, so it's been harder for her to take time off. We have multiple departments that have scenarios similar to that. And then other ones, I think, are just busy. Their workload has picked up since the pandemic, so.
Ms. Hebert's doing two jobs. I mean, you come, you're like the poster child for the exception to the rule perhaps, but let's continue this discussion next time. Let's take time to look at the memo. Let's come in with a proposal for the fire department, and looks like only 2 people impacted potentially. I'm not sure what the chief's contract says, but let's look at that. Let's bring it back on the agenda next week. Okay, gentlemen, is that fair?
Yeah, the chief's got an email below that list, Roger, if you look down further.
Yeah, let's save it for next time, so we don't, I don't want to.
He has sent me, sorry, he has forwarded some emails. I believe I've sent them over to you guys, but I'll re-forward as well. But, you know, he laid out a few different proposals, but many of which involved a buyout of vacation time. So I'll send that over to you. We'll come up with whatever scenarios, and I can put that on the agenda for next week.
Okay, thank you.
Very good.
Back to the agenda. All right, so now the rest of the meeting is budget focused. I'd like to start with the articles. I think we can get through the articles. I'm not sure we've had a discussion of the articles previously, so I'd like to start there. I know there was a new email that was circulated today with regard to the articles. I've not looked at that yet, so if we're talking about things and something's changed, Ms. Hebert, could you let me know? I'm not sure what the new email did today, but I've got notes in the old articles and things I've highlighted, so I'd like to stick with my version.
That's fine. So I'll let you know there. The email basically listed 3 articles that were being pulled. Then I also gave an update on the capital items. I know we talked before. Yes. The original list of articles, I had pulled any cash capital articles, but I did give you the spreadsheet separately so that you could review it. And I highlighted 4 articles, you know, after reaching out to the department heads to find out which of these are detrimental if we don't have them on the warrant. So there are 4 that I highlighted for you that department heads indicated were important that they felt should be on the warrant, even though we're kind of holding off on cash items.
Okay. So we'll hit those as I go through my old list. We'll hit those, correct?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so here I'm here. All right.
And Dave, I sent that to you too, so you should have that in your other email.
I need 1 second. All right, so going through the articles, June 2020, and we're all looking at the same list, I'm assuming, but I'm gonna, you know, some of them I'm just gonna say standard and move past unless somebody wants to talk about it. Article 1, I think, is standard. That's on the agenda every year. Article 2, I think, is standard, and I doubt there's a snow deficit this year. Is that correct?
There is no snow deficit right now, so we might be able to pull this off.
All right, we may have money coming from the snow budget item to free cash, hopefully, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Item.
I was just
Mr. DeRoche.
interested, do you have a general idea of what the number we spent on snow removal this year was? 50?
We're about, I think the last time I checked, we're about 100,000, give or take.
All right.
Yeah. So.
You know, we got some prior year bills. We got $5,000 for an insurance bill. What is that?
It came to us, you know, it's an old insurance company, and it was something from 2013. I guess they did an audit, they said, and they found out that part of the deductible wasn't paid. We looked into it and found that there wasn't a remaining balance of $5,000 for the deductible for that year. So that is where it came from.
We haven't paid any of these, right? You can't pay them without approval. They're all okay.
That's correct.
All right, so any discussion on Article 3?
Nope.
No.
Article 4, we owe $465 reimbursing employees for fire materials, fire literature.
Yeah, and so this was kind of a misunderstanding, I think, too. This was a newer item for them from their contract. There are people who were taking courses, and they had paid for the materials, and they were due a reimbursement, but they were not due the reimbursement until the course was completed, which ended up after the fiscal year closed out. which essentially made them prior year bills. So it was somewhat of a miscommunication with the chief, and now we know about it, so it won't happen again. But unfortunately, again, it is a prior year bill, so it has to show up on the warrant to be paid.
And they're entitled to the dollars. It sounds like it's just a timing. It's a timing issue.
It's a timing issue, yep.
Item 5 is
Item
run
5
service
is-
at the fire department.
Yep, that's actually pulled. So we had saved it as a prior year bill, but then found out that it was a statement error, so it was paid. So we are good to pull that one off.
I just need 1 second. So that one gets deleted.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so item, what line, numbered 5, well, it was numbered 6, now numbered 5 is the budget. We're going to do that next.
Roger,
Yes, Mr. Gasper.
just stick with the numerical order that they're in right now. It's number 6
Okay.
you're going to discuss?
6, we're going to come back to 6. We're going to go to the actual budget.
Right.
I'm going to keep going down these line items.
Can I
these
talk
budget
about some,
articles.
can I talk about some verbiage that's being used now?
Sure, and yeah, the verbiage on this page, yes, definitely.
Correct. So we added this clause with references Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 41, subsection 108. That's basically the same thing as Ms. Hebert had in her contract that I was not in favor of, where it takes the, if somebody wants to lower a salary at town meeting or have that discussion, they lose the ability to be able to lower a salary. If you have a rogue board of selectmen, that's what this law does. And it basically states that the only way for it to be changed is as a subsequent fall special town meeting to be able to bring this back up, and it has to be done prior to the certification of the tax rate in that year. I don't know why this law has been referenced in this article when it never has been in the past, so I guess I'm confused why we added that law chapter.
Is that a change? Did we make that change, Ms. Hebert?
This was copied from last year, so I can, my goal is once we vote on all the articles to have town council give, an okay on everything to make sure that all the verbiage is good, but this was copied from last year, so I can ask them about this and if we need it or don't need it.
I looked at last year. The reason why I brought it up, Ron, I looked at last year's motion and it's not in the motion, so.
It might have been in the article though, because I just copied stuff from last year, so this would have been in the motion. From last- in the
Let's
article.
get a legal opinion as to whether or not it's
Okay.
necessary. All right.
All right.
All right, 7, golf course, again, we'll talk about that when we talk about the budget. 8, sewer, we'll talk about that when we talk about the budget.
Can I ask a question, Roger?
9, yeah, go.
Julie, last year we talked about, with the water budget, right? So if you went back 2 years, the water budget would be in there, the same as the golf course and the sewer.
Okay,
2 years ago. Last year, it wasn't in there, and it also wasn't in another place where we did all the compacts where we got the total amount of budget. I think it was like Article 4, where it says where all the money's coming from.
Mhm.
It didn't incorporate the 1.695 million from the water budget. I just want to make sure that should we be having it as an article, the water, like we did 2 years ago, and yet last year it was totally missing. I just want us to try to stay uniform with what everybody's seeing.
yeah.
Yeah, water should be here, right?
So the only issue with water being as a separate article is just where the sum shall be raised as follows. Because
Oh, it's in the big budget though, right?
It's
It's
in
in the
the-
big budget, not a
yeah,
separate
it-
article though.
well, yeah, so water, if you look at the revenues for the general fund, water is included on that page. So it would be harder, I think, to pull out as a separate article, because then when you do that motion for the operating budget, it'll usually list in it like so much from water revenues, so much from water surplus. I think it's easier to keep that all together, but like you said, make sure it's listed in that general fund piece then.
Yeah, the big article, the first, I think it was like Article 4 of last year, Roger. And it's where the finance committee chairman reads that article where all the expenditure or funds are coming from, right? To equal the whole omnibus budget.
Mhm.
It was missing. And it didn't, if you added up all those numbers, it didn't add in the water department budget. Remember I talked about that a couple months
Yeah,
ago?
yeah, we've had that.
So I just want to make sure, and the year before it was like in this kind of a format that we have here for the golf course and the sewer fund. So I'm just trying to make sure that Ms. Hebert, if we're looking at some things that we did last year, I just don't want to look at some things that may have not been correct. I want to make sure that Ms. Hebert has got this stuff and it's inside the budget this year where it wasn't last.
It feels like it should be a separate article, unless it creates a problem apparently, but it feels like water should be a separate article.
It was the year before, so whatever year, we're doing 21 now, so I think it was in 19, but it wasn't in 20. So this 19, it was done one way, in 20, it was done a different way, which I don't even know if it was really done. So we're going to let that go. Ms. Hebert will make sure.
Yeah, think about it, Ms. Hebert. My preference would be to have it as a separate article, just because it's a unique.
No, I see that it might be easier for some people if it's a separate article. I think the problem though becomes it gets voted as part of, like Mr. Gasper said, that whatever article it ends up becoming, the omnibus budget for the general fund is technically part of the general fund because the water is listed as a local receipt, and that's how the recap goes. So yeah, it would be easier for other people to follow having it be a separate article, but I think for the DOR, it might make it more of an issue. But noted, Mr. Gasper, I know what you're talking about, and we'll make sure that we have everything together for that piece this year.
Thank you.
9 is the cable fund. We got to fill in the numbers here. We got to fill in numbers everywhere, but 9 is the cable fund. 10 is a standard every year. 11 is a standard every year. 12 is a standard every year.
So to catch you before you do it, 13 is one of the ones that I highlighted in the email that I sent out that is being pulled. It was submitted by Building and Planning, and they discussed it and decided to pull it back. So it would be on a fall town meeting if we're able to have a fall town meeting instead.
I mean, this is an issue I raised last year, and I'm gonna this year as well. That there, and we'll get to them, but there are some bylaw changes, and my preference would really, last year I remember being surprised that the bylaw review committee was meeting the day of the town meeting to review the bylaw changes that were being proposed, and it just, bylaw changes shouldn't be on the town warrant until the bylaw committees approve them. So whoever's proposing changes needs to get them to the bylaw review committee sooner rather than later and get their endorsement before they're even submitted for the warrant, would be my opinion. So, and we can talk about the things that are proposed later, but that's the way it should work. I mean, we've got a bylaw review committee that they need to weigh in on these things before they make the warrant. So 13's dead.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep, go ahead.
I just want to agree with you 100%. It's one of my comments I wrote down here is we're back in the old days, right? And I agree with you 100%. You have had that conversation with the board in the past, and it's part of the vetting process.
These things.
It's part of the vetting process. Is when people stop becoming aware of these things and prepares them for public hearings and things of that nature. So I think you're absolutely spot on. Any bylaw change should absolutely be in front of the bylaw review committee and not done forcibly 5 minutes before the town meeting, as you alluded to.
That's exactly what happened last year.
You really don't have a choice, guys. It's nice that you read it, but thank you very much for saying, yeah, see you later.
And Mr. Chairman, I also need some clarification on Articles 14 and 15 by the building commissioner.
Yeah, so do I. Yeah, agreed.
They're very to the.
Can we bring Mr. Merritt in next week?
They're very confusing. Diameters, half of upland. Yep. I'm sure they can be explained in a reasonable way that we can understand.
Ms. Hebert, let's get Mr. Merritt on the agenda for next week. Agreed, Mr. DeRoche. And those were the things I said I highlighted those as I was 14. I think I know what this relates to, but I'd like Mr. Merritt in to talk about that. 15, same thing, upland circles. 16, we're adding a big stormwater bylaw. And I don't mean to gloss over these. I think I'd like to hold these till we've got Mr. Merritt to come in to talk about them and we can focus on them more. But, You know, we've got the Stormwater Bylaw. I'd like to talk about that. I think that one seemed fairly standard, but
And if I can, Mr. Chair, for the stormwater, we have a couple articles on this year that are mandatory for us in certain ways. So stormwater, this bylaw has been mandated by the EPA. As you know, I think November, December of this year, we had an audit done on our MS4 permit. And, you know, Merrilee has been doing a great job keeping up with it, but it's one of those unfunded mandates, stormwater, that it keeps growing and growing and growing. At this point, the audit showed everything was fine, but we do need to have a bylaw update, and this is what they recommended for the bylaw update. If we do not have this approved, there is a fine that comes with it. And while I don't know the amount, I know that other fines that have been threatened in regard to the MS4 permit have been over $100,000. So it might seem like an easy article to bypass because we, you know, especially where it's, you know, we're looking to minimize for this town meeting. This is one that we absolutely need to have on there so that we can
so
avoid
we will
having
put it on our agenda and we will approve it. Is that what we're being told?
Mr. Chairman,
Casper?
this bylaw is very controversial, if you ask me. I've done what little homework I've done on it because I know MS4 permit was talked about a year ago, but no discussion with the Board of Selectmen. I don't know who's trying to lead this pack, but I can tell you now, I've done some homework on the DEP's website here. I'm going to say it. I'm ashamed that whoever isn't doing this because there's supposed to be all kinds of things that were previously done before we get this big 4 1/4 page bylaw stormwater changed. And I'm appalled that this Board of Selectmen have never been brought into the loop. On the overview, outreach requirements of the MS4 permit, I'll just briefly touch on it because we're going to discuss it next week, but it says the MS4 permit requires each town to implement a public education and outreach program that reaches 4 different audiences and that includes messages from most relevant to that community. I'm not going to go on and on and on and read about all of this stuff, but the next one that I've seen, and I've been on the DEP and EPA's website because I'm a huge believer in stormwater controls in our rivers and ponds, and that's what this is all about. It talks about all of our departments that should be involved in this process, and some of them are under the Board of Selectmen's control, some of them are not, but I'm appalled that I have never seen or heard of this, and now we're getting this ginormous bylaw pretty much jammed down our throat. And if anybody doesn't think that it's controversial, I can tell you right now, this is extremely controversial. And I've read through this bylaw. Ms. Hebert told me that Woodward and Curran actually put this together, not our conservation agent, stormwater management agent. And I can tell you right now by reading the DEP's website, it is extremely controversial because this bylaw is blanketing the whole town of Acushnet, including our residents, with best management practices that pertain to industrial zoning. And I don't know why that's happening, but it's very alarming to me. And I don't think it's right that this bylaw is in front of us and we're going to try to put this through town meeting because of a threat of a fine. I'm beside myself looking at this at the last minute and trying to do my homework and getting some information when this is supposed to be a long process over the last 12, 18 months, whatever these people have been doing to come up with this bylaw. And we've never been brought into the loop once on MS4 permit. It's a shame. I'm appalled. I hope that we can get to the bottom of this, Roger, but it's not fair that we're going to put this on town meeting floor and tell people we don't know what the hell we're talking about, but just vote it because we're going to be fined. I'm beside myself.
Would this be Mr. Merritt or Ms. Kelly would come in to talk about?
Miss
Did we get the
Merrilee
appropriate
Kelly.
person?
Yeah, Merrilee is the main person who's been managing MS4. So.
Could we bring her in next week?
Yeah.
It is possible to just have allergies, right? Okay.
Yeah.
We can't-
Confirming.
Did you say something, Roger? Because I think you were choking.
I said it's possible just to have allergies, right? And
Oh, yeah.
all right.
Don't wear your mask.
Sometimes a cough is just a cough.
The pollen has started, my friend.
All right. So, same thing with 18 floodplain overlay district. I think they've just changed the flood maps, is what this is, and
Yeah. All right, so, sorry, so 16. So 17 is one of the other ones that I had listed that we're pulling. We never got the language on the Superfund
Oh, that's the
cleanup.
super fun one. We're pulling it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're gonna pull that one. So that number 18 is the floodplain overlay district. It's the FEMA. This is the other one that we're mandated to have on our warrant to vote an update on. There's been a lot of work in the background because FEMA has been unwilling to change the dates. And a lot of towns are worried, we're all in the same boat here. We have moved our town meetings to the end of June, but we're still unsure if we can even have a town meeting at the end of June. And FEMA, knowing that, still was unwilling to change the deadline. And ultimately, if a town did not vote to make this change, it would impact the residents. So if there was a FEMA flood disaster that happens after, the vote and we don't take it, people wouldn't get reimbursements from FEMA. They would be nullified from being part of the FEMA disaster just because of a technicality over voting a map. So there's been a lot of work in the background. We've been working with SERPED. I know Henry's been really involved, as has Jim, but we're working to get legislation up to try to allow a potential for the selectmen to vote this instead of town meeting, in case town meeting can't happen until, I believe our deadline is July 8th. So the selectmen could vote it. They're also looking to try to see if they can force FEMA to change the deadline and extend it. So if people need to move their town meetings beyond July 1st, that they would still be counted and they wouldn't lose out on this. So it's something
This
that
is
we have
them
to
just changing the flood zone, changing the flood maps, saying what is in a flood zone, what is not in a flood zone, and you will acknowledge we've done this.
Yes.
Roger.
Mr. Gasper, go.
We've done some routine changes to our floodplain maps, but it doesn't involve a lot of properties because obviously all we have is the Acushnet River, but it could impact those that are along the Acushnet River with their insurance and stuff because of floodplain mapping. Insurance companies, if you do a homeowner's policy, they go, oh, you're in the floodplain now, you need to pay flood insurance.
I live it, I know.
I know some folks out in Fairhaven by the water, and I can't believe what they pay for homeowners insurance because of floodplains. And most of them are uplands, right? They could be 100 feet above sea level, but because of where the map, so this could be controversial too. I think it needs to, I think these things really, these kind of things need to be vetted well from whether it's our board or we bring in the people that are responsible so it can be vetted. And, we could let people know that this is coming, but, I guess the people that are in the floodplain would like to be notified that these things are changing and maybe have some conversation with town officials before it gets changed. That's all.
Yeah, I suspect that that's got a mortgage on their property, once their property goes into a floodplain, their bank notifies them that it's happened.
Yeah, their insurance goes up.
The process. Yeah, the bank's going to say you're in a floodplain. We're forced to. You will get flood insurance. You have to have it.
Yep.
Government won't let us have a mortgage on your property if you don't have flood insurance. So
I know some
that's
folks.
the way people find out.
I've known some folks that have been forced out of their properties, unfortunately, because they just couldn't afford it anymore.
So who could come in, Ms. Hebert, to talk about that? Is that Mr. Merritt? Or?
Yeah, Mr. Merritt's done a lot of work on it.
Let's bring him in next week.
Yep.
19, the sewer project costs. I read that. I'm assuming that's put forward by our DPW working with Woodard and Curran, or how's that proposed? Have you read that?
So this is this would be a bylaw change. And so if we decide to keep this on the warrant, the selectmen will need to have a public hearing on behalf of this bylaw. The other bylaw changes are related to planning and zoning. So the planning board has them on an agenda for a public hearing, but this one is not planning related. So the selectmen would have to host a public hearing for it if we decide to have it.
Before town meeting? I don't think that's likely.
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, Mr. Gasper.
I talked to Miss Silva today. She's the one that's really worked hard on this bylaw with, we have a different town council, Mr. Garatowski, that helps us with all our water and sewer issues in town. He is the sewer man as far as bylaws go and giving us guidance. I spoke with him today as well on some different issues that I had some concerns with. I talked to Ms. Silva. This is not something that we need to do for this town meeting. It was being prepared, and we didn't know what was going on for COVID-19. But this is basically, if we plan on doing future sewer, which we do because of the CWMP is now finalized, at the time that we're ready to do something like that, she said, you could do it in the fall or do it anytime that you want to bring a sewer project and vote it at the same night. So it's not something we have to do. You know, if you feel more comfortable with Ms. Hebert telling you that and Mr. DeRoche, you feel more comfortable not hearing it from me and hearing it from Ms. Hebert, that we can make a motion to
No,
take.
I believe that seems reasonable, Mr. Asper. I mean, I read it. I've got some questions about some of the language. I'm sure it's fine, but I just instinctively, I don't see us having a public hearing before town meeting. I'm not sure we're going to have a town meeting, never mind a public hearing and town meeting. I don't know if it's possible.
Well, can I make a comment before you go any further so everybody's understanding what's going on? I guess when Ms. Hebert said to us last week that if we didn't have anything controversial, we could lower the quorum. Well, we have things that are controversial. Any bylaw, zoning change is controversial. My issue, and I've spoke to a few different people that are trying to go through these Zoom meetings with public hearings. They haven't all worked out very well for public hearings, and I don't know how we're going to get a large group planning board would be able to do this. I mean, the only way you could do a public hearing, I think, is if you use like the school gymnasium and put chairs 6 feet apart. And I don't know. I'm just saying for the boards, we could break all these articles down. We already know we got a pretty stripped down budget. I don't think it'll become controversial, but if we can give people confidence that there's nothing controversial, then we could probably have a lower quorum and get.
If it's not urgent, why force it?
Well, we need to determine whether or not this meeting is going to be controversial or not, and there are controversies. I'm seeing a lot of them, right? So I mean, we need to figure that out. If we're going to have 75 people for a quorum at town meeting, and what happens if we struggle on a normal time to get 75 people? First of all. And what happens if we don't have a quorum? You can't spend without appropriation into the following year.
We need 75. I thought we talked about the fact that it could be less than 75.
Only if it's not controversial.
Who determines what controversial means?
We do.
All right. That could be controversial.
And we know that this thing's controversial, right? So, I mean, I guess once we figure out what the hell's going on with some of these zoning things, I mean, those require public hearings. They got notice, the planning board, I don't know exactly. I know that they're required to advertise in newspapers for so long and in a public website and public local newspaper. I don't know if it's 10 days or 15 days they got to keep that. I mean, they really only have about 20 more days, 25 more days to do this so Julie can post the warrant. We got to print and all that stuff. So we're running out of time is what I'm saying. So I don't know.
We wanted the budget done by next week is the goal we set for ourselves.
The budget's one thing. The articles are a whole different ballgame because public hearings are involved here. So that's the trouble we're running into. And you have a public hearing.
I don't think public hearings are possible.
Not possible. No.
Roger, so we do a public hearing. Say we do a public hearing. My problem is this. We do a public hearing. I don't care what one we want to pick. Pick one out of a hat. And we get people that can't get into the meeting for the public hearing that's in a butter to one of these bylaw zoning changes. And then they're contacting the Board of Selectmen saying, I tried to get involved in the public hearing last night. I couldn't. I'm filing a lawsuit. I don't know how all this stuff works. I mean, that's what I'm talking about.
I think I'm agreeing that anything that needs a public hearing is probably not practical for this upcoming town meeting. Unless we've got something that we absolutely have to do, and I'm not sure what qualifies. The one from the DEP EPA may qualify for that, but does that require a public hearing, or are we just forced to adopt that? That requires a public hearing.
Which one?
That one.
The stormwater.
Not the stormwater. The one before that.
No, the stormwater one. That's the one.
Is that it? Okay, the stormwater. Yeah, the stormwater.
Any
Public hearing?
bylaw change requires public hearing.
I don't know that it's practical to assume that we could pull off a public hearing before town meeting.
So just so you know, town council has given us some advice on the public hearings. So they have said that you are able to do public hearings through Zoom or some other technology like that, but they kind of reiterated what we've been saying. Anything that isn't necessary needs to wait until the state of emergency is over. The only thing that would be deemed necessary would be something for town meeting. So they've said that we can have like a Zoom public hearing for an article for town meeting, but they would caution that the person running the meeting would be very technologically advanced in terms of managing a Zoom conference, because
This Zoom can get it's got features we don't use. I mean,
Yeah.
possible Chris and Nick are using them behind us, but I mean, I've seen features where you can take people and break them out into separate, you start with a big group and you send them off into separate rooms. I've seen that. So there's a lot of features here that we don't use.
Roger, I tried to contact DEP when it came to this stormwater, because I'm that appalled about this stormwater thing that it's taken this long to get in front of the Board of Selectmen. And again, that bylaw that was written by Woodward and Curran, I've gone to, and it's very easy to do, go to the DEP's website, and it's broken out residential, even municipalities are salt sheds required to be part of the stormwater thing. Our parking lot for municipal buildings is, but they're all subcategorized. And industrial's got the BMPs, which is best business practices. And it looks like our bylaw is bundling best business practices under for industrial and blanketing the whole town of Acushnet. It doesn't seem like a good bylaw.
Let's bring Mr. Merritt in to talk about this, Ms. Hebert, next time, and we'll determine whether or not we bring this to town meeting, whether or not I think we need a decision pretty quick. If we're going to try to have a public hearing and we're going to try to get this on the agenda, I think we need that decision pretty quick. Let's bring Mr. Merritt in next Tuesday, and we'll discuss it. We'll discuss it then.
Well,
And Merrilee also, please. Yes.
Well, gentlemen, after listening to this discussion, are we in favor of striking number 19 from the articles at this time? I mean, this is a betterment. It's an article.
Yeah, I would say yes. I would say yes.
You know,
Let's strike it.
the betterment charges, change in betterment charges for a new sewer system that, we're gonna.
Doesn't feel urgent. Mr. Gasper, you agree?
Absolutely. I'm the one that made the recommendation.
All right, why don't we strip 19? Why don't we take 19 off the agenda? I don't think we need a vote. I think we got a consensus of opinion on that. Article 20, Community Preservation Fund. I think this is a standard article.
It's standard and it's mandatory for, it's like the standard article for CPA. In order to have any expenses for the following year, whether you use them or not, you're mandated to break out what your estimated revenues are and make sure that you're filtering them out, putting at least 10% into each of the three major categories and separating 5% into an administrative costs expense category. So this is a standard article.
I got that highlighted. Who's getting this 10 grand in administrative cost?
Nobody is getting it. It's only been spent every year $875 for the membership fee. So
okay, and what happens with that appropriation? It rolls back into the like a general fund for CPC. I know they got some kind of cockamanian language, but
yep,
the budgeted reserve fund, rolls back into that.
It does. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
What is 21? We've got requests for money from the CPA.
Let me pull that up. So the next three articles are the articles that CPA had voted to include before all of the COVID stuff happened.
I don't have. I've got something. Number 21 says CPA articles getting final versions from Lisa. So something changed.
It says Little Toy Project located at Middle Road. They're looking for a Little Toy Project, $80,000 for the purpose of improvement of a little toy project located at 800 Middle Road, all pursuant to the Community Preservation Act, because it's, you buy it's swing set. It's one of the categories, park and recreation.
It's for the playground. It's for the playground at the school.
Yeah.
Sorry, Roger, you're looking at one of the older versions where I didn't have these twice. It's okay. I have 3 articles that we added thereafter. So the first one was the 80,000 for.
All right, I'm opening a
updating
new
older
version.
toys.
I got it. All right, I got it.
Okay.
Yeah, the problem, again, with the problem with this, and I know there's been some controversy with parents that want playgrounds at the school. I mean, I know the Ford Middle School's got a nice one in the back by the soccer fields, and I don't know, I know that they busted up the old one at elementary school. I'm pretty sure that's what this one's for, is the elementary
Yeah,
school.
it's little toy.
Because we went in there, the DPW went in there and put the wall up for the drainage and did some tarring over there. And so I know there's a request for the little playground thing over there. And I know that they have gotten really expensive because of the material. Like, it's not so much all the things the kids get to play on, but it's the undermat that they need to prepare. So little kids, if they fall off the swings in the monkey bars, we'll call them. Back when I was a kid, we had monkey bars. I guess they won't get hurt, right? Because you can't put it on top. So I guess the preparation, and you can't put materials where the kids can put it in their mouth because they're first graders, second graders, and things of that nature. So I think that might, but again, we don't know. What are we getting for 80 grand? This is the problem with this COVID stuff. We can't have people in front of us going, this is what we're getting. Here's a rendition of the playground set and go, oh, that's nice. That's worth 80 grand. I don't know. It's a tough call without seeing things. We're just randomly approving $80,000, but we don't know what we get.
Siebert, do we know who's a component of this?
And they've already raised 20 grand of this, right? No, we're breaking up.
Yeah. Yeah, so
Siebert,
sorry, I
who
kind of
put this article forward?
Yeah, I got broken up a little bit.
Yeah, the
Can you hear
audio.
me?
Yeah.
Audio's
The school department.
popping in and out. Yes.
Okay, so the
school
school
department
department put
audio.
it through. Yeah, they put it through. CPC approved it, and like I think Dave just said, the parents group raised $20,000 to help support the total cost. So they've received a quote for $100,000 new playground, and as Mr. Gasper said, it has to be ADA certified. All of the playgrounds have to meet certain requirements now. Like you said, you know, like the base needs to be made of certain materials. So $100,000 is the quote, and it's a structure that they feel comfortable with, you know, that the kids will be able to get a lot of good use out of. So the 80,000 would be coming from CPC, from the CPC funds.
Gentlemen, thoughts on this article? I know this one's been coming. I've been talking about this for years. I know it's been coming.
I hope that if we spend the money, the kids are able to use it. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, if they go back to school.
Well, it's not only that, is even if you know, hey, let's hope for the best for these poor kids, right? It's sad that some of these kids ain't getting graduation and proms this year. So let's hope for the best for these children. But you know, it's sad if we put this thing up, and I think that it'd be nice if we did make the approval, and if we ordered it, they could come and assemble it in the summertime when school's not open. But the school department may have to make tough decisions on how they're gonna educate children, and they might not be allowed to go out and play on the swing sets if this stuff's still around. We don't know, but you know what? I mean, I know there's a lot of parents that want to see this. I'm not going to fight something like this. You know, it is what it is.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, it is what it is, and you know, those kids. I see them out there running around chasing each other. I mean, whatever. Hey, it's CPC, and I hate to say it that way, but it's you know, it's for the better good for the kids to have fun at recess instead of standing there looking at each other playing eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
And the Community Preservation Committee push this through, or advance this request?
Article 22, $2,000 for painting the walls at the old fire station. It's a historic building, so it's considered eligible expenditure of the funds.
That's fire station 2? It's considered historical? I'm just stating a fact.
Assuming, yeah, we're all learning together.
It is. It is.
All right.
So it's an acceptable use of CPC. Any objection to the article? I don't see this one as being, I see, you know, appropriate use of the money.
Yeah.
We got a $5,000 for the pollinator garden.
Motion to table.
Garden.
Motion to table.
I do see this request. I guess this is the second time I've seen it now. It comes up every year. I sometimes I just question, and I do question it because I look up the hill at the Parting Ways building and I still see it unfinished, and I don't know where
Yes.
CPA money
It's a work
needs
in
to
process.
be going to that. I just look at the front, or the whole building needs to be painted. They're working on the side. We gave 30 grand last year or so to a vault that was constructed in the back, but the building itself is still in need of repairs, and we're asking
Some
for
exterior work still.
$5,000 here, and
First of all, it says down below, it's for the pollinating garden, and that thing's just a pile of weeds, and it's never been properly maintained, and now they're asking for a part-time garden employee. Really?
No, I would disagree. I would disagree because I have driven by many times on a weekend, Saturday and Sunday, and I say many, I mean many. I mean, there's somebody spending a lot of time working there. I've never been up to it and looked at it, but I've seen multiple times somebody working in that garden. So I don't know what it is or what the goal of it is, and that's my ignorance. I'll acknowledge that, but I think it does get a lot of effort. I guess I would suggest that the proponent of this article, if they want to come to the Board of Selectmen meeting next week to talk about what this is and what this does, and help us understand this, I would encourage that. But I think we should move this forward to next week at this point and hear an argument for why this is important. Saying table, and table just means we'll discuss at some point in the future. So was that your goal with this one, or did you have something else in mind?
Motion to table, it means get it off the warrant for this year's town meeting.
Well, motion, that'd be a motion to remove it from the warrant. Table would mean just, we're not going to talk about it right now. We'll talk about it at some future time. So if you don't want to do it, I mean, we could have that discussion, but I'm interpreting table as we're just going to kick it out till a future date. So
It's a pollinator garden that the whole board.
Agenda.
Yeah, well, I would say take it off the agenda. I'm not in favor of this, and ain't nobody going to change my mind. I hear too many things about that garden, and I've never been a big fan of it. It was for butterflies and bees, because we're losing bees, and we were supposed to plant lavender plants there, and look, I mean, now we got the yeah.
I'm okay with striking it from the article. All right, I'm okay. So with striking,
you don't want to hear it. You don't want to hear a presentation on what it is. No.
Yeah.
No. Okay. All right. All right. Let's remove it. Okay. Now 2 versions of this I'm working on. So all right.
All right.
Sucks when you put it sucks when you put your notes on one and then you get another one, huh?
I know. All right, so I can certainly go back to the other one, but not my numbering is going to be different from just give me a second, please. My apologies. Yeah, I'm just trying to edit this document.
All the next ones are housekeeping ones. I can take care of 5 of them right now for you, Roger, while you find this.
Go while I'm playing. Go ahead.
Number 24 is housekeeping. It's cemetery board to pay people for operating the cemeteries. We've done that all the time. 25 is to authorize the Recreation Commission to perform work at the park with compensation to paid said members. That's fine. It's housekeeping. 26 is to vote to fix the maximum amount that may be spent during the fiscal year 2020, beginning July 1st, 2009, for revolving funds. It's all about revolving funds. We have public library, conservation, park and recreation, council on aging.
Those are the same dollars we've done last year, Ms. Hebert?
Yep.
Okay. It's just housekeeping stuff to allow them to take in money and then be able to expend that money. That's all that means, right, Ms. Hebert?
Yep.
That's all it is. Instead of going to the general fund, they have some money to operate within themselves and do things with donations and things. At 27 is the library board of trustees being able to sell books for $1, discarded books for $1. 28 is a resolution outlined in Appendix D. It's that's whereas the efficient administration of the town affairs achieve. That's all stuff that's been done in the past. Correct, Ms. Hebert?
Right. That's standard.
And that's it. You're done.
All right, so let's just quickly go through the appendixes. A is the proposed stormwater article.
Right? Which we have Marilee coming to talk to us about.
B
next
is the
week.
floodplain overlay district,
Yep.
which we'll
Yep.
talk about.
That's Article
C
18.
is sewer project costs.
Yeah, well, that's betterments. We struck that. That was Article 19.
Yep, okay. And D is,
That goes along with the last article I
people
just
have
read.
left town service, okay.
That's
So
all.
why
of
don't
it.
why don't we jump into the budget itself, to the numbers?
Roger?
Yes, yes.
I think Ms. Hebert's, we said that we were gonna limit spending of free cash, but I think Ms. Hebert's given us a little list of a couple of things that some people may think deem
Those are
necessary.
capital items.
that they would-
Yeah.
Let me open that. That's the 5-year capital forecast document.
Yeah.
All right, let me, I can't have two with the same name. All right, give me 1 sec.
Hey, Julie,
Yes.
while Roger's looking, this is kind of like the pavement management plan, year one, 1.7 million bucks. We don't have that money.
No.
We don't, we discussed that anyway because of the budget shortfall. I mean, we don't really have, we said that we were gonna keep free cash to the duties kind of things, but we're might be using some when we get done with the budget. What we're at as far as a deficit, where we're gonna be at, depending on what we do with budgets, is a whole different ball game. That'll determine what we have left from free cash, right? So, I mean, we can, I don't have a list. I don't think I have Julie's new one. I do have a list of them, Roger. So if you just tell me which ones they are and
Got 'em,
who's
yeah.
who's they are that Julie says that we had.
All right.
First one.
So there were 4 articles, and I reached out to all the department heads to let me know which articles would be a detriment to the town if they were not put on this warrant. And so I have 4. 2 of them are from the school. The first one is the upgrade to the Wi-Fi for $85,000. So on your list, it's near the top. A lot of the
You want
schools are.
to talk about
Line
that? before-
48. Line 48.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I can see it. The upgrade Wi-Fi, 85 grand. I forget what that was. Can you, do you know what it is, Julie?
I know that just in general, they have very old Wi-Fi networks. The Wi-Fi is very shoddy. A lot of departments can't get on it or get on it and lose it. So as they've been advancing technology and trying to get everyone on different, things with between both schools, the Wi-Fi has been a real detriment to them. It's held them back from being able to really accomplish all of the different pieces of technology that they have.
So the 5G Wi-Fi, that's not what Chris Oliver came in and talked to the board about running a wire down from the schools to the police stations. That's not this, Chris. Hey, Chris.
How are you, Mr.
This is
Gaspar?
not this is not that wire running from the school to the police department to wherever.
No, it is not. That is the fiber optic, the dark fiber cable that you're referencing, the wire that goes to the police department, to the school department. What Ms. Heber is referring to are the wireless access points.
Yes, I get some background noise, yeah.
Somebody's
Oh,
got
I'm sorry.
background.
I'm running the school committee meeting on my other computer.
Okay.
So you very well to see right now, the town is planning on a certain amount from
There we go. It's nice and quiet now. So
Thank you.
this money for the Wi-Fi would actually upgrade our Wi-Fi in the building. As over the past 3 years, we continue to invest in Chromebooks and other wireless technology. We're at approximately 450 Chromebooks right now in the schools. We're looking right now, actually, we were just talking about it earlier today, purchasing another 150 Chromebooks. Obviously, the unknown, there's a lot to the unknown right now with opening up in September. But that being said, that we want to make sure that we have reliable, fast internet in the buildings. And it works. It's okay right now. It's doing what it should. However, there are some dead spots. It drops off. It's slow. The technology we have is probably 6 or 7 years old. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it actually is, especially when you're looking at all these different new wireless band frequencies.
And that's for Julie was saying that's for the elementary school to be able to communicate with the Ford Middle School, Chris?
So the Wi-Fi would be for both buildings, Ms. Gaspar. That was so not so much communicating between the schools, because we already have fiber optic cables underground that connect the two schools.
Okay.
So these are the Wi-Fi access points that would literally sit on the ceiling of each classroom.
Okay.
And so when students come in, bring Chromebooks in, bring other wireless devices in, that will allow them to connect to our network and obviously out to the internet.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I mean, you can't do what you need to do in a classroom if you don't have good connections. We just seen what happened to our meeting when it got bogged up. That's got to be really annoying to administrative people and the school teachers over there trying to do things with their classes. I don't have a problem with investing in that.
I'm good with that
Thank
as
you
well.
for your
Thank you, Mr.
support.
Oliver.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Next
Chris.
one is preventive
Thank you.
maintenance at the roof at the school.
It's just funny, I forgot Chris was here. He's the perfect one to answer that.
And apparently he's paying attention too, to two meetings at the same time. All right, so preventive maintenance of the roof at the school, you got to take care of your roofs. I no problem with that.
That's not a lot of money, is it, Julie? I mean, we talked about all of this.
Well,
What is it?
So we've had this as a recurring article on the last few town meeting warrants.
mhm.
And this is because, as you know, we've been working to get MSBA funding to fix the roof. And so every year we put money aside to try to help keep up with the maintenance until we're able to replace everything. The MSBA won't be until next year. At this point, there were a lot of delays that led to us putting it off, but the school currently has about $50,000 in old articles for the maintenance. They've used some of that this year, not a lot. They originally had $30,000 on their request, but in talking to Kristen, she said that they'd be able to lower that number, and then if they need more, they'd be able to make up for it in the fall. So we plugged in $15,000, which is keeping them about the same $50,000 total that they've had the last few years. I think it'll put them a little bit above that going into next year, but that seemed like enough for them to at least keep things maintained until they get the new roof.
Julie, it looks like you have 30 for fiscal year 21. 15 was for the prior year.
Yep, so that was one of the
30?
updates that I put on. So
You want 30? Dave, do they want 30 or 15?
They originally had 30, but they said they would be fine with dropping it to 15.
Right. I see 15 on mine. So.
All right,
There's a new one and the old one, Mr. Gasper.
that's fine. Motion to
Multiple
approve.
versions of.
Yeah. Just
Mr.
a quick
Grosh?
question. The major roof renovation. So you're telling me that's on hold now?
It's not on hold. So we were originally, if you can remember, pre-COVID, the school had talked to us about could we have a spring special town meeting because the MSBA, the timing of all of the MSBA work, if we were to include it in this town meeting, again, pre-COVID, on the original May town meeting, if we had voted for the MSBA funding to go through, they may not have had enough time to get a vendor in place for summer work.
Mm-hmm.
So knowing that we weren't able to have an early spring town meeting, they have an additional year to get that voted at town meeting. So we've kind of said, if we can put it off to the fall or, next spring and just plan on having the timing down, we'll be able to do that. So they still have a plan to do it. It's kind of, again, a timing issue, and it's all been jumbled up by the COVID now at this point.
It's peanuts. It's $15,000. Roger, we've been doing this for several years for the school.
We got to do it. I never object to spending money on roofs.
I agree with the 15 grand, but the other project I'm talking about is the $1 million
It's big dollars,
roof,
yeah.
repair that we were talking about doing this summer. So
Yeah, that's the
COVID,
yeah, that's a few $1 million project, but that MSBA grant, I think we're gonna. Kristen Flynn was in front of the board a year or two ago, and she told us that there's a good chance if we get approval for that grant, that MSBA grant, that we'll get 55% reimbursed.
60%. That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
It used to be 79 when I was on the school
Right,
building
well,
committee.
maybe this is something we consider for the fall, because we're gonna have the same scheduling issue if we plan it on doing it next May. So,
Yeah.
okay, that's, all
Why
right,
don't,
so.
why don't we hit them all,
Grant,
Mr.
yeah,
Gasper?
no
You made a
problem.
motion. Why don't we go through the list of all the recommendations, and then we can vote them all at once if that's okay. We've got vehicle refurbishments for the fire EMS. Ms. Hebert, what?
So this would not be coming from free cash. The fire chief had suggested pulling the money for this from the capital expenditure fund. And this would be for engine 5. So he,
Is that the ambulance reserved account, or what is the capital reserve?
so the capital expense fund is the money that comes from the solar tax revenue. It's that
Okay,
special legislation that was put in place quite a few years ago. So all the money that comes from solar tax revenue goes into that expense fund and can be used for capital items. So
What does vehicle refurbishments mean? What specifically is he planning?
Oh.
he has, let me just pull up the email.
Julie, I can talk about this. It's for engine 5, Roger. It's one of our engines. I've talked to some people about this engine 5. It does need maintenance. It's not a lot of work. It's $5,000, I think it was. It's maintenance that definitely needs to be done. From the individual, yeah, for the fire truck number 5. I think we're going to be looking at spending some more money for the fire department as far as repairs go and things of that nature. So this $5,000 is definitely well needed
This
from
is
everybody.
35. This line item's 35 though.
What is it?
It's $35,000. It might have changed again from the original version of the doc.
What did I see? That was 3,500 or 5,000. What's 35,000?
35,000.
Yeah, that's the number.
What is that? Oh, wait a minute. I seen some document.
The line below it, the line below that's 3,500. The line below is 3,500.
What the hell's 30? What's the reason for 35,000 then?
Fix
So
the fire.
you were right. Engine 5 is what the fire chief had said. Engine 5 has a lot of work that needs to be done. They had it inspected in December. He listed a bunch of things, a lot of leaks and different valves, and they put off getting these fixes done, trying to get through to town meeting, and they were hoping to have an article put on, for this amount so that they could cover any of the reparative maintenance that would be needed for the vehicle.
And where do you say this 35,000 is coming from? Not from free cash?
It would be coming from that solar capital expense fund.
That's fun, right.
Oh yeah, that fund I created, the solar. How much money we got in that solar thing that was created?
Offhand right now, it's over $80,000.
Mm.
I'm
Good
not
for
sure
us.
how much we've added this year. Going into this year, there was 80, and whatever we added from this year, so probably over 100 at this point. Then
I thought I read for engine 5 it didn't seem like that much valves and things of that. I thought it was $3,500, but 35,000. I guess as long as it's being spent on that engine and
we have
not
detailed-
other things.
I suspect $35,000 goes quickly on that type of equipment,
Right,
but it
sure.
would be nice to have detail for just backing up what this request is. So could we see that, Ms. Hebert?
But in theory, I'm okay with it.
I am too.
We need to maintain our fire department. We need to maintain,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you get some detail as to what he's thinking he's going to do with the funds would be helpful.
Julie, normally the chief would submit to the Board of Selectmen. He's probably already got it done from a shop that's told him about all these problems, gave him that list. If we can get that list with all the repairs that are going to be done for that engine, it'd be nice.
now that you say that, I probably have that somewhere that I can forward to you guys.
Please. Should we move down? And the last one highlighted in yellow is the electric vehicle leases. I know we have 3 vehicles under lease, and the leases are expiring. Has it been 2 years? Was it 2 or 3 year leases?
3-year leases. So all 3 of them expire in August. And as you know, we have one that's being used at the Council on Aging, and the other 2 are here at Town Hall, mainly used by the Building Department and the Board of Health. So yeah, these leases expire in August, and that's why we put it on here flagged to stay on the town meeting. we got some quotes for getting new leases, and 25,000 is more than enough to cover those. There might be new registration fees, so that's why we added a little extra. But it's needed. The vehicles are used all the time, and we would still be looking at getting grants if there are any available to cover the
What happened
cost.
last time, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Would these be
so
the same cars, or are we gonna get new cars? We're gonna lease the same cars?
they would be new cars. I think right now we have one Nissan and two Chevys, but in getting the new leases, I think we would be doing just the Chevys, because, you know, testing them out, that's the one that's more preferable. So, but they would be new vehicles, the newer versions.
The 25,000 would cover us for how long?
3-year leases for 3 cars.
How much was
I
that
think we-
request? How much was that request, Roger?
$25,000.
25 grand, okay.
I think I'm not sure how optional this is. We've got 3 town vehicles that we need and we use, and you know, we can let the 3 vehicles we've got now go away, but what do we do with the people that need the vehicles? So I think we either start reimbursing them for using their own vehicles to get around, or we provide town cars. And
It's 8,000. It comes out to what, $8,000 a car for 3 years?
Yeah,
That's a pretty good deal.
yeah, it's a couple hundred.
And we've done it through the green energy community. We put all these charging stations. I mean, you can't really beat that deal. I mean, it's costing you what, a little over $2,500 a year for a car.
And we also put stickers on them, emblems, ways, safety belts. We got a couple grand for that.
Yep,
I believe.
we did.
So could I get a motion, gentlemen, to approve of $85,000 to upgrade the Wi-Fi in the school, $15,000 for preventive maintenance for the roof in the school, $35,000 for vehicle refurbishments and fire EMS, and $25,000 for electric vehicle leases to advance
So moved.
those as articles to town meeting. We got a motion, second?
Second.
Second, further discussion?
Just making sure that we get a list from the fire chief on that engine
Yes,
5.
definitely.
I want to, you know, they usually said, the company will usually send it to them and gives us a breakdown of all the work being performed. I want to make sure that 35 grand is going to be utilized for that engine.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. All in favor of that?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. While anything, so these are the ones we've identified as being important. Is there anything else you see here, gentlemen? So if we don't do this now, it's all gonna get kicked out till fall town meeting potentially. Is there anything else you see here that we should be doing now? Again, we put this on the department heads and asked them to prioritize, and these are the 4 they came back to. Is there anything else here you think we should deal with right now?
No, I mean, I'll look over the other list that Julie has sent me, an updated version to see what's changed with the correct amounts in it, Roger, but I don't,
Okay,
you know, we're trying to keep this as plain and simple as we can, right?
agreed.
Can
So-
I ask a question? Because I just scrolled down the list here and then something came to my attention. Very short money. Last year, we approved $2,000 for a GIS plotter. Okay, well, all right. And then they asked for it again this year. Is that correct?
No, let me see.
You know, I see estimated costs. All right, okay, must be reading it wrong. But-
Oh yeah, no, that's listed under FY20, so that's
Okay.
already, yeah, I
Alright.
highlighted in green all the new ones, so you could see
Okay.
them.
So no, there's, you know, I mean, if the department heads said these are the essential, I'm okay with that. I mean, until we really get an understanding of, you know, what our total budget and what our total revenues is going to be.
And we gotta hold a reserve on, I mean, we're already, you know, we got a $365,000 deficit, I think, Julie, is the last number you've given us to close. We were supposed to look at the budgets. I think that conversation is gonna be difficult enough without spending any more money out of that, because then we're down below that $800,000 threshold. But anyways, if we don't close that budget gap, and we just blew, what, the 25 grand, is that, what's that coming from, Julie?
Which 20?
The car lease, free cash. So we're taking 125 from free cash, right?
Yes.
The rest of it's from that solo revenue fund?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yep, okay. So we got 125 from free cash minus 125.
Could we go to, let's go to the full budget document, which is the townwide budget at this point. Which, and we had a number of budget hearings, and those were interrupted by, again, COVID-19 changing everything. So we had a number here. I don't think we met with everybody that we would have met with necessarily, but all the budgets have been submitted. The original fiscal 21 departmental request was around and say $34.3 million. There was some concern that we discussed in prior meetings about potential revenue shortfalls, both from state aid, potentially excise tax, potentially local taxes, people unable to pay their real estate taxes. And, Ms. Hebert suggested we get proactive and look at cutting our budget at this point, and went back to all the department heads and said, look at your budget again, and what do you have in there that could be cut? And we went from an original $34.3 million down to, I'll say, $33.2 million. So about $1.1 million was cut from the budget. And I've been through, I've highlighted, and there are reductions, major reductions, minor reductions, but $1.1 million has been cut from the budget. And I don't know, are there line items you want to talk about, gentlemen, or, and I've been through it line by line. I've highlighted the major changes. We can talk about those if you want. Any general comments on what we've got here?
Roger, I think, with your experience and my experience of looking at the budgets, it's tough. I mean, Julie and the department heads have really, we've taken an axe to it and done what they have to do. And it's unfortunate that we're, we had
$1.1 million cut from the budget.
I've had, and that's without the school department. That's where the school department's still coming in at plus 2%, right? And we don't, and Old Colony not making any adjustment to their budget, Roger. So, I'm looking at it from a perspective of Ms. Hebert gave us the numbers where they were at after making their cuts, and we're a deficit of $365,000. Is that correct? Good enough number, Julie?
Yep.
So we're looking at, because of the 410 that we're proposing, that could be a 5% cut from the state aid, right, to get to the 410, and we still got $365,000. Where do we go from there? I mean, I sent you guys an email with some cuts in
I looked at those, Mr. Gaspar. Yep.
Yeah.
And I talked to Julie about some of them, and
I've got that open, I think.
I think when I went through this exercise, I went through the exercise as I could, looking at things, and I mean, like, I'll go, reserve fund. I said there's 150. You could take 25 from that, but even that's 25 grand more, Roger, right? From taking, now I'm just working off that 365 deficit like we were a normal practice that we used to do. The problem is I look at that cut and I say, yeah, we could make 25 grand. But the problem when I look at it is saying, well, we've cut everything else in the budgets. Maybe we need that.
We need it more than ever. I mean, that's the one you got to be real careful about.
I know. We were given a task to do, so I'm just throwing recommendations for us to float. And, I look at that number and I say, okay, maybe not. We got a salary in the selectmen's budget that, we don't, I got 11 grand there, and we say, what do we get for the $11,000? And, I don't know. And maybe that's something that the board needs to make a decision on as well, and say, maybe this year we don't need that position. It's just, they were just ideas, because everything else has been brought out to the slaughter shed already. You're just kind of looking at things, and it is what it is. And then there's $2 grand from a line item 512-2000. It's only $2 grand, but it's $2 grand. I went down to the finance director's position. We know that's that number. Julie's already took a little bit off that. I think there's. I put my potential savings, I think, on the list for you guys. Or maybe not. I just said we can expect a bigger savings, right? So there's some money there, and You know, the treasurer's position, I just left that as notes. Mr. DeRoche has only been on the board for less than a year now.
Yeah.
It already assumes that the board's not going to fill that position, right? You know, town buildings, $13,000. We can bring it to 10. It's $3,000. Snow and ice removal. I learned a lesson with Miss Hebert. We got 110 grand in there. Well, Miss Hebert informed me that when Mr. Noble, we raised it to 110 from the 50,000 or whatever we had. Miss Hebert's informed me now that that may have not been such a good idea, because once you make an appropriation for snow and ice removal, in the past years, Roger, you remember, we used to
25,000.
we used to deficit spend.
We
And-
budget 25,000 and spend 200,000, right?
Right. So what we did, and I remember I was advocating for it, we need to raise that and make it somewhat more realistic, right?
Yeah.
Well, we weren't told at the time, until I spoke with Julie a week or two ago on this number. She says, hey, great idea, but the problem is the law states that once you set a budget number for snow and ice, you can't bring that threshold down in deficit spend anymore. I didn't know that. So that eliminates that cut, right?
Right.
Park department, they went up on some of their salaries to 25 grand. As much as I love everybody over there, the previous year funding I wrote on my notes was 21. It's $4,000. You could probably come down with that. Pensions, I don't know if we can cut anything from that number. That's something for Julie. I know there's been some you know.
That could be a tough one. The pension funds have lost money
We
with
just-
the
We
stock
get a bill.
market.
We get
The
a bill,
prob-
we're told to pay it.
The only reason why I put it there, gentlemen, is this. It's not to pick on pensions. It's because Roger knows this. In the past, we've had a little extra buffer in that number. And that's kind of where the little stash house was, to keep a little money just in case of different things. And so I put it in there, and Julie knows better than, as a town accountant, now town administrator, she knows the number of what we're getting charged every year. We can request it at any given point, say, show me the number. I said, can we cut anything? The water division, the percentage, all I wrote was a note because I want it corrected, because Kathy Silver's position in the water division and sewer divisions, the percentage of allocations needs to be changed. I wrote like Kathy's salary did. Dan Menard's still got a $10,250. I don't even have to look at the budgets. I remember them. $10,250 for sewer, $10,250 for water. And we know that the percentage is 70% is taken from water and 30% is taken from sewer based on the amount of users in each category. Kathy did it with her salary, but there was no adjustment to Dan's. I would just like to see that adjustment be made as well. Doesn't affect the budget because it's enterprise, right? It ain't going to make a damn bit of difference. And my last talking point was highway department that I gave to all you folks, and I wrote,
Yeah,
They
road
cut-
materials.
they cut all engineering fees and police deals and reduced road materials down to 90 grand. We heard the argument that, hey, I've been operating on 125 grand since I've been here. That's why I went to 200,000. Now I'm down to 90. So that means there's not much getting done in road materials. There's $0 in police details. There's $0 in engineering fees. How much work is getting done? But we left overtime at 25 grand.
We were talking, and last time, just while we're on this, we talked last time about getting a detail about what had gone through the road materials account this year. So just drop that note again. I think we discussed
I'll
this.
get that and I'll
Try to change the
have
subject.
that to you.
Roger, that's two different stories. What I was talking about was the 250 grand that was supposed to be for road paving, and 150,000's been spent because of the way that article was written. You could pretty much use it to, I don't know, go put concrete.
Well, that's why we want the detail on what that was spent on. Just
Right, and road materials is a budget line item that's in DPW. That article that I talked about is totally different, that $150,000 article.
But same purpose of those funds, though, right? Same
Well, one was meant
purpose of the
for,
funds. Some was in the budget, some was in an article.
one was meant by the board when we voted it, because we were using more money from excise tax and we didn't get it to be every year. I said, why don't we use 250? If we're going to use more of excise, because the DOR is telling we need to use more of that, not have such a big buffer, we should be using it for paving roads, because the original intent of excise was for roads and bridge repair. And we haven't used it at all for that, ever. And we're budgeting $1 odd million now for budgeting purposes, because the law has changed that says for any lawful purpose. So when we made the appropriation, Mr. Noble took that money. He didn't use it from excise. He funded that through overlay surplus last year, which means he only intended to do it at 1 year. And that 250 grand, that article was written 250 grand, and he basically wrote it so that you can expend that money on any damn thing that you want, when that wasn't really the intent the board had voted. We said we wanted it to pave roads.
Yeah, so let's if we could get detail on what those dollars were spent on, please. You do have a lot of, can we, Ms. Hebert, Mr. Gasper's got some good observations here. Could we work some of these changes into the budget to the extent they're practical? And some of them, like, I know you adjusted the, some of these adjustments I think you made already.
Yeah.
Some of the adjustments I think you made already.
Yeah, I mean, so if you,
The only one that I don't, the reserve fund transfer, I think we want to leave the reserve fund as high as possible.
I agree, Roger. I just
yeah, that's the only one I would say that
I absolutely agree, because we have done so much cuts that there's probably a good chance. I don't know, Julie, what do we spend? What has been the expenditures thus far this year from reserve fund? What do we have?
very little. I mean, I want to say around 10 or 20,000 total.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And no, I don't remember seeing anything. Yeah.
There've only been a handful.
What is the special project number? Is that Mr. Young salary out of the Board of Selectmen?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I think that brings in some grants, so I'd want to talk about that one, I think, before we zero it. But I know we do, one thing we did make go away is the, in the budget, or planning board made it go away. It was proposed originally that we update the master plan, and I know that's been pulled out. So, and that is one I did want to talk about before that went forward anyway. But
Mr. Chairman or Julie, is there any estimated time when we know what the state budget's going to be and what the state
I don't think the state knows.
Is going to be? Right. No, I understand that, but
Yeah.
aren't we also trying to
Yeah,
establish a
it's a
budget,
mess.
which I think is correct? But we're assuming we have to have an assumption that we're getting this amount of money from the state.
Mhm.
And that's a variable right now, right? I mean, as much as we like to say it's only going to be 5%, could be 7, could be 3, could be 25. I mean, less than what we normally get.
That is correct.
I wish we had something in place right now. I know that, the state is still working on numbers, and we don't have anything solid yet. They've said definitely don't count on what the governor proposed in his initial proposal, which was before COVID hit. That's the only thing they've said for certain. Honestly, I've been getting a lot of information from a lot of different sources. I think 5% is a good conservative number. I don't think we'll have nothing cut for next year. We will definitely have something cut. Like you said, though, the numbers are all over the place, and a lot depends on what happens from here. If they find, a vaccine or a cure tomorrow,
everything.
Yeah, this all kind of, maybe it does clear up quicker, and the impact is less.
Right.
So I've seen some projections, like you said, that are as high as 20-25%. When you look at some financial forecasting, they project it as a worse loss than the recession in 2008. Again, it's all modeling and assumptions that we don't know what will happen from here. So the 5% for me, depending on what you guys think, for me, I think it's a good number to start with. We're looking at carrying money into the year next year. You figure every 5% is $400,000. If we have a $20,000 cut, I think with all the free cash we're carrying over into next year and the free cash that we would have certified for FY21, we would be able to cover a 20% cut relatively, without money from free cash between the 2 years alone. Anything beyond that, yeah, I mean, if we're still in that situation, then we're forced to, make cuts or take different, changes from that point. But I think the 5% for now, and setting ourselves up to be able to cover, a 20% cut if it happens, is a good place to start.
Okay.
You know, we're covered for everything in between.
But I got a little confused on all that 20%, and I understand where we're at today. I'd rather, you know, trying to predict what the future is going to be, and you know, you talked about a vaccine, and everybody kind of agreed. But you know what? The real question is, gentlemen, is this: a vaccine is, and I follow all of these companies because that's what I do.
It's just going to take a minute. I'm going to.
It could be.
When you're at work, I'll be 1 minute. I'll be 1 minute.
Yeah.
Somebody's sticking their head and just.
That vaccine could be, I'll talk to Julie and Dave, that vaccine, oh my God, get rid of that picture, Roger. That vaccine is, you know, we're talking 6 months minimum out. And you know what, Julie, we're trying to do everything we can right now. And we've all been put, everyone, not just in the United States, but across the globe, have been put in a really bad position financially. This is an economic crisis. I believe it will be worse than the health crisis. We've already seen $3.5–4 trillion from the Treasury and the Federal Reserve thrown at this problem. I don't really know how far we've gotten with all that money, but when people think that money's free, it's not. It's got to be paid back, right? So I keep saying I hope to hell that we get rid of this thing, and you know, I don't know, but I can tell you this right now. I know Roger mentioned it earlier that we don't want to talk about layoffs and things of that nature. And if we got to that point where you're talking about a 20% cut from state aid, and this COVID-19 comes back and reaps its reary head back in the United States and keeps us shut down.
Yeah,
There's no way. We don't know what's going to happen with school departments, the library, council on aging, the town hall employees. Everybody is. I mean, it's going to cause panic and mayhem, and you know, it's going to happen. We can't continue to pay people 100% of their pay for working 15 hours a week, right? And you know, it's already happened in the private sector. That's all I do is follow companies, publicly traded companies, what I do for a living, right, in the stock market. And I listen to these people all the time, and it's just god awful what's happening to people. Most people's pays, even if they are still at work, companies have cut them 20% off the top of their salary just to manage through this thing. And you know, 20-something million people have lost their jobs in the last month. Now, after the last Friday's unemployment rate, the number came out, was another 4 million people. We were at 16 million the last week I talked about it. This is devastating to the U.S. economy. And you know, I can't stress sometimes how lucky how government employees are very fortunate that they're not being cut like they are in the private sector right now. So I hope that I don't have to do that, and the board don't even have to consider that. And I hope 5% is the maximum cut that we're going to have to see and do. But we can only keep our fingers crossed when it comes to COVID, and we don't know, right? And as far as that vaccine, now that Roger's back, and I'll stop. We had a nice conversation without you, Roger.
I was listening to it all. I had one of these in. I heard it all.
So let me just ask this question, because we have
Thank
this.
you for the filler.
a lot of people have this conversation. They're like, oh, what you guys just did is, well, if a vaccine comes out, you know, and that's 6 months at least out, right? But let me ask this question. How many people here would actually get the vaccine if it came out? Would you immediately go, or would you wait 3 months to see what happens with the people that are getting it, if there's any side effects?
Well, first of all, I think there'd still be a shortage of vaccines, like there's a shortage of testing. They might come up with a solution, but by the time we get it, might be another 3-4 months before they can produce the actual vaccine to distribute to, you know, people.
If they had 330 million, because that's roughly what we have in our country. If they had 330 and it was readily available, the fire chief called you up and said, I got enough to do everybody in the town of Acushnet. We're going to do a clinic. Would you go that first day or first week?
I'm rolling my sleeve up.
And let's get back to the budget.
I'm going for it.
Thank you.
If I can add something.
Receiver, go.
Just because the treasurer collector was kind enough to send this to me today, and I think it's somewhat relevant. You know, when we're talking about the free cash numbers that we'll have for next year, you know, obviously a lot of that is dependent on what we have for revenues this year in excess of what we anticipated, and expenses, what we're turning back. We all know that we put a freeze on non-essential spending. So in terms of our expenses and what we'll have turned back, we should have a good amount of money that we'll be able to contribute toward free cash. The treasurer collector sent me her collector's report showing the receivables for taxes through today, and we're thankful to the residents of Acushnet. They've all been paying. I know we had extended deadlines, but as of right now, real estate totals are at 94.5% paid.
What percentage of what percentage of that is paid? What are you talking? If we have 3,000 people, 94% have already paid it.
This is of the total bills, like the total amount of the bills. Yeah,
Right.
we have 90. What did I say? I'm already schooled. 94.53% of the bills have been paid. For real estate, for personal property, we're at 98.64%.
Wow.
For motor vehicle, we're at 79.46%. And for the utility services, we're at 93.39%. So, I'm sorry, no, 89%, 89.57.
So
overall,
that's just not adding to the deficit that we already have, right?
right, that means because the concern would be we would be losing
Cash
free
flow.
cash if people weren't
Yeah.
paying. If our revenues are lower than what we anticipate, that would hit our free cash. So the fact that we're at really good figures, those are figures that we would normally see at this point. It's a tribute to the residents that they're making payments, they're able to make payments. And so our free cash won't get hit for next year because we're not getting that revenue in. So
Good.
yeah,
Good.
just want to add that.
Those are very good numbers. I had
It's not
quite a
very good
concern
numbers.
of that back when this whole thing started, that we would be much lower than what we are.
Yeah, I mean, who knows from here for next year, but at least through the end of this fiscal year, we're doing well with our collection. So I just wanted to add that in there for you.
Thank you.
So the fiscal year 21 COVID changes gives us a budget of $33.2 million. Are we prepared to move forward with that budget?
What's up? Are we still looking at I go back to this question. I know y'all looking at an overall budget number, but are we still looking at the same deficit, 365?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
so I haven't taken the changes that you gave, Mr. Gasper. This isn't including any of those changes being plugged in. So if you would like me to plug in any of these changes, I can, and we can get a new number for you.
Well, I just think that it warrants. I mean, I had like $90,000 more in savings, but the problem is 25 of it came from reserve fund, and Roger and I and Dave DeRoche. I mean, we know, hey, maybe we're going to need it, so that eliminates 25 off my 90, right? What does that take me to, 65? So, and then there's
And the snow and ice is another 10.
I think that this-
Yeah. And I
you can't change 10 and ice. So I'm down to 55 now. So if you want to put in, you can't lower snow and ice, Roger, because you can't deficit spend after that. Future years.
No, I know that. That's what I'm saying. That's another 10 that disappears. The only other one
Right.
I think, Mr. Gasper, I'd want to talk about before we made the change is the 10996, because that's something we've that's the special projects in the Selectmen's office. We've had that in place for years. I'd like to talk about that, I think, before we just
That's fine. I didn't
toss
do
that
it.
aside.
I only did it as a temporary measure, right? I mean, you're talking about, you always say, Roger, we're in extraordinary time. So you know what special project are we doing this year? I looked at that position and said, you know, based on a circumstance and knowing what's going on with that position, you know, it used to be called grant writer in the old budgets, and then we got tired of asking how much money you got in grants, and we changed the title name to special project manager, and we're not doing special projects. So I just threw it out there for everybody to consider it.
Mhm.
And
So, I mean, yeah,
the only additional comment I'd make is I'd like to have some discussion regarding, I'd like a presentation on that position and what that would entail before we
That's
made that
fine. I
change.
got it. So-
we're messing with livelihoods with that, and I'd like to have the conversation. I'm not saying I'm for or against it yet. I'd like to just, before we throw the number out, I'd like to have a conversation. So
I agree.
that's my only reservation there.
I agree. So, I mean, if you want to put the rest of the cuts in, Julie, I mean,
And the rest seem reasonable to me.
It is what it is, and you got about an extra, I don't know, you're calling it what, 50 grand now or whatever, so we might be down to 315, 310 that we're using from, just call it 300 grand. Who cares about 10 or 15 up and down right now, right?
Okay.
And Roger, the only other thing that I mentioned, I said to you last time about the contractual obligation because of that negotiation with the police department and the cadets being cut out. I did actually talk to the chief. He said the chief did tell me it's going to be cutting it close. We're very fortunate with the cadets that we hired in the previous go around. Remember the 4 gentlemen that we hired?
Yes.
Well, one of them happens to already gone through the academy. We're very fortunate of that. So that when he cut those academy costs, the cadet costs and the academy costs, we're basically not losing both of those positions. It's really just one. And, the chief seems to think that he can do things to work around that and still manage the way the contract language was set up with the way we set it up, right? We did some cuts to overtime and filled 4 on, and when one bangs out, you don't fill that position. So that was my concern. And the chief feels like he's pretty confident that he can manage his way through this fiscal year with that cut. So I said, if you're comfortable, chief, I guess I'm going to be comfortable knowing that I'm still a little uneasy with that, but we'll see.
I just want to question one other line item. What is 512000 under Selectmen? 512000.
That's temporary salaries, so.
Salaries temporary. I found it right after I asked it. I found it.
Okay.
512000. Okay. And what have we used that for?
In the past, that was used for, well.
Say it, Julie, say it.
I think before we had the part-time person, that was used for coverage when we needed coverage. A lot of departments have a temporary line, and that's typically what it's used for, is when they've needed coverage. A lot have taken it out, and we haven't used it at all.
We used nothing in 19. I don't know what we've used this year, so.
No,
Nothing this year. Okay.
No, the only things that we'll use is if the part-time person has to work more than her allotted 20 hours a week, we've charged the extra there. So very little.
And good with the rest. So with those changes, are we comfortable with the budget as presented, gentlemen?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get, Roger, we come back to what we're doing. What we're doing is we're offering Julie, the school department, do you have any word with their 2% increase? Is that okay? Are they there or?
So the last update I have, the budget subcommittee met last week, and they have cut down to a 2.5% increase. I let the school superintendent and business manager know that we plugged in an estimate of 2%, and the 2% was somewhat our max. If anything, the selectmen were hoping we might be able to cut more, because this is the point that we started at, and we've been looking at cuts on our side. So they understand that, and they're still working with their subcommittee. It's hard. And I think it's hard. It's a hard exercise for people, because it's not a typical year where you're saying, everything is fine, and we're hoping for this new position, and maybe we don't get it. We're anticipating that revenue that we normally get may not be there, and so it's not about. Obviously, we want the best for the students, and we've had a presentation with the school, and we know they have needs for certain things, but if we can't afford to pay the people to do whatever projects or whatever new things they're looking at, that's the problem. So it's a different perception. It's not a regular year. It's anticipating that we could lose 20% of our revenue from the state and from our taxpayers. So
yeah, so they're still working on the. I'm happy that they've gotten a 2.5. I think the finance committee needs to hold them now at the 2%, and that's where we're going to be left with a $310,000 deficit that we're going to fund from free cash at this point. So, we got 300, and we just approved $1.25. So you're talking 425. Call it 450 off the million. So we're gonna be left with 575, right, Julie?
Yeah, about that.
Somewhere around there, yeah.
Somewhere around there. So we're, we're below that $800,000 threshold, but as Roger says, and, hey, it is what it is. I mean, I don't look at these budgets and say we could do a hell of a lot more from it. The only thing I know I asked you, Julie, did you reach out to Old Colony? And I know it sucks because we have to have 2 other member communities to say, we need you to cut. Did you hear anything from Aaron Polanski? Did he say there's anything that they can do? Or they're working on it or nothing?
Right now, yeah, I did reach out to him. As of right now, they're not making any changes. They're, looking at everything. They're conscious of, the situation for many towns, but they have not voted to act on any changes to their budget at this time.
I went to their budget hearing this year, and I sat there and looked at the change in our share, and I was at the time thrilled that the increase to town of Acushnet was so modest. I mean, I don't recall the percentage,
Right.
but it was extremely modest year over year. I at the time felt really good about it. Now we're given the circumstances, everything's changed, and that budget hearing was probably 3 months ago before we were thinking of any of this.
Yeah,
So your revenue assumptions are assuming 5% reduction in state aid. Is that that's what this budget presents? But you think it could get as bad as 20?
We could.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Hoo-wee. So we got big
I don't know what
problems.
happens. Yeah.
We would have big problems, I guess, gentlemen, look, we got about, call it 550, 600,000 left in free cash. It's below the threshold that we want it to be at based on our goals and objectives, but we are in those very uncertain times and unprecedented times, and this is going to be a hit that I'm hoping, it's not any fault of our own. It's the fault. It's state aid being cut $400,000 for crying out loud. There's no other way to explain it. We did everything we can do. I thank everybody for doing what they've done in this budget season. And I know it's been difficult to do what they've done, and I commend everybody for doing it. And, I think, I Heather Sylvia from the Council on Aging left us a little note inside of there with some of her cuts, and she said, I'll even forfeit 2% increase. She was the only one that said that. Other than Pam Labonte didn't put in an increase as an elected official, so I commend Ms. Labonte for that as well. Not putting in a 2% increase, but, Heather Sylvia, she was so sweet from the Council on Aging to say, if it'll help, I'll give up my 2%. And it's, what is it, $1,200, $1,500? It just goes to show you the kind of individual that Heather Sylvia is. So I want to just reach out to Heather and say, thank you, but, you deserve the 2% this year. And we're going to, if we can't afford to give you that 2% and we're $1,200, we're in a lot of trouble. So hopefully
I would, yeah. If we did it with everybody, we would do it. But
hopefully this is going to, I don't want to listen to Julie with a 20% cut from state aid, because we'll be talking a whole bit. That's $160,000, right? No, 20 on the aid is $1.6 million.
Yeah, it's 1.6 million. You got it. 1.6.
Yeah, that would be a kick in the butt, and you know what? We're gonna have mad problems with that. But anyways, let's go with the 5%. We got a decent budget. I think we all agree that this budget's been pretty much stripped to nothing. I mean, it does suck. I do want to thank everybody for going through the exercise and doing what they've done. Julie, thank you for leading that charge and doing what you need to do and put those extra cuts in there. And it is what it is. We live with what we got, and we need the school department to come in at 2% because that's what we plugged in, and we don't want to have a bigger deficit. But it is what it is, and we've done everything we can as far as articles go. I mean, we didn't go spending money on free cash on the articles, and there's a little bit of money, but I think the school department, the roof and the Wi-Fi stuff needs to be done, and it's not something that can wait. So we've done good, and if we can get the controversial articles off of town meeting, we can have a quorum of 8.
That's correct.
my sound just go dead? All right, I'm sorry.
All right,
It's just-
there you go,
I was
Roger.
on another screen and it got quiet. So, all right, so we are going, for the next agenda, we're meeting on the 19th, and I know the agenda says the 19th and question marks the 26th. We're gonna meet on the 19th. I want to bring people in to talk about those articles that we're questioning. So,
Yep.
I think that was Ms. Kelly and Mr. Merritt.
Mr. Merritt and Marilyn, yep.
Yep, let's bring them in if we can.
If you want, I can also, I'm sorry, if you want, I can also have the fire chief come on to talk about his article.
Just
but also-
give us a list of, I don't think he needs to come in necessarily. Just give us a list.
Yeah, I agree. He's obviously brought, normally what happens is he brings it in for like an oil change, let's call it a light service. And then the tech will go in and he writes up all the things that he finds wrong and gives a suggested list of all the repairs. I just want to make sure $35,000, it's going to go to engine 5. And we're not going to say it's engine 5 when we're putting 10 grand into the ladder truck or some other vehicle. And then we can't keep track of what's going on. Just, if he's going to say it's going to be for that engine 5, then let's spend it on engine 5, bring it up to snuff. We know it's good for a few years or 5 years, whatever it may be. He's got a detail list. He's presented it before to the Board of Selectmen. He can do it again.
I didn't know.
Sorry, I gotta go back to something we were talking about. The school department budget, the number we've got budgeted in there, did they give us those numbers or did we plug those numbers in?
No, I plugged in an estimated 2% overall increase for them. So they still have.
Oh, so we're not where we think we are then.
Right. They are at right now with their budget subcommittee a 2.5% increase overall. So they still have to cut a 0.5% overall. And I've talked to the superintendent.
Do you have a figure on that, 0.5%, or?
I think it's about
$75,000.
Yeah. Yep, 80,000.
They'll do it. We chopped odds.
Now, hold on, let me take that. Tuition depends on what we count, I guess. There's debt service in here and.
Yeah, you got to back all of that out.
Possible. I don't know. It's not simple math. You know, things are tuition to Fairhaven and New Bedford, we don't control at all. Collaborative school, we don't control at all. Transportation, we don't control. So, you know, this may be harder than just giving you a number and say get there. So,
Roger, what we haven't discussed with the school department, I think Julie might be doing it. If she doesn't, maybe this will help you out. Is you got to remember that they have like 1.3 million. Let's use transportation, Roger. I'm not going to talk about too many things in the school department's budget. $1.3 million. Well, they didn't expend all that money this year, so that would technically get sent back to the town for free cash, right, Julie? Return to the general fund. So if they're looking at their budget and they need $70,000, if they're probably saving a couple $100,000 in transportation this year because they didn't utilize a service. Instead of returning back to the town $200,000, if they need that 70 grand, they make a 2%. They give us a 2% budget. Instead of returning 200,000, they keep 50, whatever that cut is, and they only send back 150. They're going to have money to return. They ain't buying food. Nothing from the school. You know, as far as lunches go, all those expenses have been cut. So but that should be technically turned back there, right?
Somewhat. So the school has had a lot of direction from DSE, and Chris is gonna. I think you're gonna expand on this. They've had advice from DESE asking to continue making payments on those essential services. DESE is looking to make sure that, you know, even though the transportation vendor is not, you know, driving the kids to school, they still are trying to pay their employees. So yeah, they're saving on costs for like gas and certain maintenance for the vehicles. But DESE has encouraged the schools to continue making the payments so that we're not putting all these vendors out of business. And I'm sure Chris will be able to expand on that.
All I can say is that that was
Mr. Rollover, quickly, because with.
Oh yeah, sure. Very quickly, all I can say is that that was a topic of discussion at tonight's meeting. School committee members did bring that up around the transportation contract, and I know Mrs. Flynn has been working with our transportation vendor and other school districts that use that vendor to come to terms with how that's going to be.
And there was a new contract coming up, if I remember right. There was we have a new contract. We need to negotiate a new contract next year. Was my best memory.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that, but I do know that there's.
I'm not positive either.
Well, we're only talking about that 0.5%, Roger. So I think the school committee and the school business administration get pretty creative with what monies they saved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, here's the trick though. It's not. I mean, so they originally came in with a 5.6% increase. So we're asking them to cut 3.6% from what they'd originally asked for. So it may not be as easy.
Roger.
We'll see. I mean, we'll see. We'll put it on them and we'll see what they come back with.
6% is $900,000. We don't have that money to give to the whole town.
I know we don't. I know we don't. I know we don't. I know we don't. But
Okay. We got to do, everybody's going to do their part. I think that I'm confident the school department will do their part.
all right, we'll see. All right, anything else with regard to budgets? All right, so we're meeting next Tuesday night. Was it same bat sheet place, same bat channel? And budget hearings principally. If anything else needs to be on the agenda, we'll discuss it. But really, we want to get the budget finalized, the articles finalized for next week, and decide what we're going forward with. The week after, I've actually got the PJ Keating rescheduled hearing for. So the agenda says we could meet next Tuesday and the Tuesday after, but I've got the PJ Keating hearing on the 26th. I don't know whether that's realistic that that's going to happen or not. I'd like it to happen, but I don't know where we are. I guess if the state of emergency's gone, there's no reason we couldn't have it, right, Mr. DeRoche?
I was going to say the governor's going to make. Well, the governor's going to make an announcement on Monday.
He decides.
If he, I don't know if he's discontinuing the state of emergency. I don't know. So we'll just have to wait and see what he says. And,
Or if there's a roll
maybe
in
we can get in on the 26th.
Yeah, we want to do it if we can do it.
And that's the land use license, the form for that. So we got something to talk about.
Roger.
Mr. Gasper, go.
Yeah, the governor and Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito, they've coordinated a task force, and I've been reading up and keeping up with the Karen Polito, Lieutenant Governor Karen Polito, and it looks like there's a 4-prong approach to the phase-in thing. So, whatever that's going to be for, I think Mr. DeRoche, you say it was Monday the 18th or something like that, they're going to do that?
Or Tuesday the 19th, I can't exactly remember.
So I think it's important that this board start considering how we reopen.
Agreed.
Yeah, exactly.
We talked about plexiglass in places where people are interacting a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't want to be, if we're allowed to open up, look, we're going to have some employees that just say, you know what, I'm not going back. And hey, we'll figure that out when it comes. But we should have a plan to say, the Board of Selectmen dictate this plan and say, I shouldn't use the word dictate. We say what it's going to be. And we might say, you got to wear a mask. The employees got to wear a mask. You got to still socially distance as best you can. But we need to put some safety protocols in place to keep the public and to keep our employees safe. So it's just, if you guys have any kind of ideas on how you want to do the reopening without just saying, oh, the doors are open, come on in, and trick-or-treating. I don't know if that's what the board wants to do. So I think we need to put some thought into that over the next 7 days and already have a plan in our head on how we envision this opening to go about.
Let's have that on the agenda if we could, Ms. Ebert, for Tuesday's agenda, please. Also on the agenda.
I do agree. We need to have a protocol established when we're let go and when times change.
What are we gonna do? Are we bringing all our employees back at the same time? Department heads and union, they're all going back to the regularly normal hours. I mean, I think that's something that the people are expecting us to do at some point. Not our employees might not be expecting it, but the residents are, right? And we moved deadlines out for tax payments, and thank God Julie gave us some good news. And thank you to all of our taxpayers that are paying their taxes. I guess I should come in and pay my real estate taxes now, huh, Julie?
Well,
You're in the
have till the
5%
28th
apparently
of
you
June.
haven't, so yeah, it's time.
I know. There's a new deadline.
Anything else? It's a new deadline. We've moved the bar.
Julia, Roger, this says sign here on the Rogers name. There's only one place to sign. This is the net metering agreement.
Yes.
Do all members?
It only called for one signature. We probably all should sign that.
I signed that this morning.
Okay, we should probably all sign that. It only
We didn't
calls for one
sign it.
signature.
I
did.
signed it this morning. I went into the office at the table in front. There's a signature. It said.
It's
Chairman
possible
White.
we've got multiple, we're
If
gonna
you
have
let me
multiple.
finish, it said Chairman
multiple
Roger
originals,
Cabral, and I
potentially.
asked Lisa if I could sign this, and she said yes.
And I scanned mine and emailed it back, so mine, I
Perfect.
haven't been
There we
there,
go.
but it's possible we've got
Hey,
multiple
Hey,
originals. and
hey,
that's fine.
Dave.
What?
So I'm holding a paper copy and there's multiple places. So she's got you signed in one spot, Roger signed in 2 different spots, but they're not all on the same page and they're all the same page.
I only signed it once. I don't know which, I don't,
The other one looks like, no, you got, well, whatever. There's 3 pages.
okay,
Dave signed one by himself. I'm going to sign right underneath of Roger's name, Dave, if you come in tomorrow.
Perfect.
I'm going to leave this with all the other stuff for Lisa to clean this up because I didn't use any of the stuff. I printed it out. I'm going to sign and just sign this one with the blue sticker on it, all right? And then all 3 of our signatures will be on one. So you can discard the other 2.
perfect. All right, can we get all set? Anything else? Can we get a motion to adjourn, reconvening next Tuesday at 5 o'clock?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you. Thank you all. Bye.